Pine Tree Pulse. Brought to you by the Maine Policy Institute.
Well, we're very pleased to welcome into the Pine Tree Pulse today yet another candidate interview. And joining us today is Robert Wessels, who is the one of the many Republican candidates running in the primary for governor of Maine in 2026. And is joining us now to talk a little bit about, sort of his decision to run, how it's gone so far. And I know you've been doing this for quite a bit of time, so we'll talk about that. And of course, his background and then what he wants to do once elected and all the fun stuff that we usually have for these conversations. So,
well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And it's good to finally be here.
Yeah, of course. Well, actually, look, first off, I should probably mention that we're sitting here on March when we record this, 5th? And the deadline for filing is right around the corner. And unless I missed a press release, you were kind of by far the first person to throw your signatures in. So
I've been surprised at how long it has taken others to get on the ballot. I had my signatures. I was officially on the ballot January 29th. My team we're working hard to set a record, and we believe we did. The earliest we've seen in years past was February 1st. So who knows? We didn't do a huge deep dive on that, but the reality is we were the first this year. And I've been surprised that there's a number who at this moment still aren't on the ballot yet. So
yeah, well,
they're running around like crazy.
A lot of them leave it to the end.
Yes.
That's the procrastination in politics is real. What do you attribute that to, though? I mean, how is it that you were able to sort of organize? And I mean, it's not a gigantic lift, but it's a big lift to get it done. And you guys were able to do it as quickly as you did. How was that? Why did it happen?
Well, the reality is, right, I give credit to my volunteer team. I've been campaigning actively for 2.5 years at this point. I launched in July of 2023, meeting people, gathering volunteers along the way, and staying in communication and getting them active. We planned this. Again, we wanted to be one of the first ones. The reality is, and I'm sure we'll get into this, haven't raised a ton of money, and we're using hard work and free media the best we can. And if you can get some free media from being the first one, then it's absolutely worth it. And it really is to make a point that, hey, you know what? We're in this. We can be successful and we can do big things. And again, we started planning this back in September, October, a little bit, and really got the hardcore plans done in November, got the team online. And as soon as we were able to download the files and get them printed.
Right, because you can't start until you do
correct.
That.
December 30th was when we officially hit the start button, I believe was the date. And that's printing all the files, getting all the paperwork, having everything together. And we had a team that ran it all over the state those 2 days. So everybody in the state volunteering was ready to rock and roll on January 1st.
Do you have a number? How many volunteers did you have? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't. Yeah, but it was certainly a huge. They were a huge part of that. And then you just work hard. January 1st. I don't know if you remember it, but it was cold. It was windy, and we were out there gathering signatures. We had a couple of different places we were at getting them going, and it's different. I was a selectman for 4 years, and a slightly different lift, getting signatures to get on the ballot for selectman versus governor. And so we've figured out what didn't work, and we tried some of those things, and well, that's a fail. Let's not do that one again. But ultimately, we had all of our signatures by January 15th. We were over 2,000 signatures, and then worked on gathering a cushion and then getting them to the town offices. That part surprised me a little bit. It was
getting them to the town offices.
Yeah, we were pushing ourselves, so we didn't want to depend on the postal service. So we literally drove around the state, and that part surprised me and how labor intensive it was. But we got it done, so it was exciting, and it was really nice to be number one on the ballot. Number two, be first on the ballot, and I still have candidates who are coming up and going like, how's it feel?
Yeah.
Like, you should do
Probably
it.
a weight off your shoulders. Yeah, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Well, you had mentioned when you were just explaining that you have been running for a while and that you'd actually announced back in 2023. That's a bit of an oddity in of itself.
Yeah.
That you actually announced for this race before the last cycle was even all that hot, frankly. I mean, you had the presidential race in 2024, 2023, things were warming up, obviously. So you were almost a cycle ahead in doing so. take me back in time to that, and maybe kind of give me the original inspiration for you deciding to actually jump in. Like, I think I should do this. I think I need to do this. And I think I can do this.
Yeah.
Those are some pretty important things you have to tell yourself if you're going to run for governor.
And my wife thinks it's okay to do this.
You always got to get the last veto override
Exactly.
there. But then also too, like, why that early? You could have also chosen to sort of wait for a bit and sort of not start quite that early. So just give me that whole thought process and what ended up going into it.
So ultimately, I'm number one. Again, I was a selectman for 4 years. So being politically minded and kind of looking at that and being interested in that realm of the world is definitely where I come from, and that's in me. But that was a while ago. I stopped being selectman. I decided not to run again because my daughter was really young, and every time I was leaving the house, she'd be like, "Oh, Dad, another meeting," and so I'm like, "There's going to come a time where she won't care when I leave the house." We're there. She's 17.
Teenagers, right? Yeah.
She's a wonderful 17, but the reality is, right? I don't need to be home. She doesn't worry or whine whenever I leave. But ultimately, to answer your question, it comes back down to, like with so many people, COVID. And I was looking around at our state, looking around at the way COVID was being handled. And I had my eyes open before that, but that really opened my eyes to the government overreach and the terrible decision making. I was getting my MBA. I was going through that process during that time and really just looked at it. And honestly, at that moment, I felt like, hey, should I run for governor? Like, she's doing so terrible. Should I run for governor? And then Paul LePage threw his name in there, and I was like, yeah, no, he's got it. And much to my surprise and disappointment, he didn't win. And it was really shortly after that that I started thinking about, the next 4 years later and saying, okay, like, we're going to have to go through another 4 years of mills. And I was right. It's been absolutely horrible. Almost
much worse, I would say, than the first term.
Yeah, like
first term was not
every
good,
decision has been the opposite of what I would do, and so just looking at that and seeing that writing on the wall, and being, I guess, realistic enough to sit there and say, okay, I'm a regular businessman outside of Oxford Hills. People don't know me. I don't have a ton of money and or name recognition, but what I do have is a ton of time. And so ultimately that was the deciding factor. That's kind of the decision-making process that I went through. The straw that broke the camel's back for me was when our local school district, back in October of 2022, was they were trying to pass a policy that said they can sexually transition your child without telling you as a parent, right?
Wasn't just your district, it was
correct.
other places, yeah.
Right. And obviously very similar to the Supreme Court decision, or I'll call it a decision, even though it's not the final decision yet. But Supreme Court decision that they just came out with, but very similar. And hundreds of us as parents, we live in a pretty conservative area of the state. Hundreds of us as parents said, absolutely not on our watch. This isn't going to happen. My wife and I included, and spoke up, and they didn't pass it. My wife, through that, ended up on the school board, and
funny how that happens, right?
Yeah, she ended up on the school board, specifically the policy committee as well, because they tabled it indefinitely. They didn't vote it down; they just tabled it. And so from there, I looked at her and said, "Okay, you've got this, but the reality is the problem's coming from Augusta, and we need somebody in Augusta who's willing to stand up, who's willing to fight this junk that is coming down, and who's willing to take the state in a different direction." And I looked at my skill set and where I've developed over the years of leadership and business and financial sense and organization, planning, all of that, and said, I can do this. And Maine needs somebody who can do this. And I was willing to jump in. But I said,
you have to do some extra work.
3 years to get my name to the point where I'm competitive. And I will say that it's been hard. It's been a long road. But I will tell you, I'm extremely glad I did it. And I did it the way I did it, because it'd be it would not be an issue. Like I wouldn't be nearly as close as I am right now.
Yeah. You had cited both the COVID situation and then, of course, that situation at the school board as the thing, then that one being the straw that broke the camel's back, right? As the things that really pushed you in that direction. Strikes me that both of them are very related in terms of the overall philosophy of the Mills administration and all the various parts of it. It's very authoritative. It's very, very sort of control oriented. I mean, it's basically, we know best.
Yeah.
We're going to tell you how you have to do this. I mean, the very fact that you mentioned that this is a conservative area and they were still doing it in these school boards is sort of indicative of that, right? You would think that at the school board level, that kind of thing would be attempted in places where maybe it's politically acceptable, but in places where it's not, we're not going to really do that there. Oh no, they did. And they did, and they continue to try it. And it's been pushed by like a legal side, the Attorney General's office, obviously, the Mills administration, the legislature. It's this kind of unholy trifecta of people that are pushing all these types of solutions, which essentially mandate that you behave the way that they want you to, or else. And schools are getting sued over it.
Correct.
Yeah.
You said authoritative. I would use the word authoritarian, right? Like we keep pushing the line on that government overreach. And the Mills administration, for sure, and again, especially in the second 4 years, we even had it didn't happen, but you even had the government strongly considering whether they're going to force you to only be able to buy electric cars or fuel, the hybrids in the state of Maine. Like literally saying, "Hey, you know what? We know better than you do. Which kind of car that you should be able to buy." And you see it all the way through the administration. This is just some examples, but government overreach is huge.
Does that mean that you would prefer to run against Nirav Shah? I'm curious because you say the Mills administration, and believe me, she has all the culpability in the world for all those COVID policies. But when you go back in time and look at that time that we were living through, the governor to me was Nirav Shah. Like that was the person that was doing the briefings. That was the person that was making the policy. That was the person that was making the argument in the public for why we needed to shut down and stay shut down and vaccine mandates and mask mandates and all the things that they did. It was really him. So I would suspect he might be kind of like salivating at the opportunity to.
And the reality is, right, he really became this known entity and, to some a hero, right? And to some not.
Well, they put his face on T-shirts,
right?
Toasters and stuff.
And he is now reaping the benefit of that name recognition and that face recognition from that government overreach and the terrible decision making that was going on during COVID. So, the reality though is, you bring him up for that time frame, but the reality is Shenna Bellows as well, is known for her terrible handling of everything government and the Secretary of State position.
Well, the authoritarian argument makes plenty of sense with her
that too.
It's pretty special thing to try to get your people cut off a ballot.
Yeah, exactly. And take the person off who that half the state wants. And so Hannah Pingree as well has been, but she's been more behind the scenes. But she's absolutely been involved and owns where we are as a state economically, energy wise, stuff like that. So.
Well, when you look into that poll that just came out yesterday from Pan Atlantic, which is their omnibus poll, everybody was obsessed over the top lines about Plattner v. Mills and all the horse race stuff. But when you dig into it a little bit, it was very interesting to me to see like the right track, wrong track numbers and how they've sort of cratered for her specifically in the last, 6 months to a year. It used to be reasonably split, and now it is decidedly negative. We're on the wrong track, according to Maine voters, and very few people say right track anymore. And her popularity, even in her own party, is down. And it strikes me that that's because a lot of the consequences of her decisions are now coming due. Like these metrics that we track on prices and education and everything else are starting to look pretty crummy.
Yeah. Number one, it excites me that people are seeing that, right? That regular Maine voters are seeing what I'm seeing and what I've been hearing for the last 2.5 years. So as I've been campaigning for 2.5 years, I've had thousands upon thousands of conversations, and everyday Mainers for the entirety of my campaign have been talking about what I call personal economics. And ultimately that's your cost of living. That's your mortgage. That's your energy prices. That's your property taxes. All of that. And as I've dug in and as I've learned more and what I already knew before, were these are policies, right? Like these are policy
Oh, yeah.
driven costs. We can change that is the good news. And we just need the general public. We need everybody to understand, hey, this isn't happenstance, right? Like, if we were equal with the nation on all of this, then you'd sit there and say, okay, well, like, it's all part of that. It's all interconnected. But the reality is, we are getting worse than the nation in all of these, and ranking on the top of all the lists that we don't want to be on, and the bottom of the list all that we do want to be on.
On almost
And so,
everything.
yeah, almost everything.
It seems like.
Yeah. And so the reality is, I'm really glad people are starting to see that, because we need them to see that before November, and we need to see a vote change before November because of how it's handled. I wonder, and this is just me theorizing at the moment, but oftentimes people are they don't realize I was the first one to declare, and they're always talking about how people need to jump out, or we have way too many Republican candidates. There are, at this moment in time, there are 10 of us, right? So that is a lot. But I look at it very differently, and I sit there and say, okay, like if you now have 10 people who are using logic, using thoughts, using facts, using figures, and have some sort of microphone to be able to share bits of truth, and each one of us are hitting different people around the state and their circles of influence. And so if you have 10 people that are talking about the way the left is going and the direction we are heading as a state and giving facts with it, and all of those people and their circles of influence are hearing it, that's a ton better than if there were 2 or 3 of us, right? And so I don't know that that's playing a major role in why people are waking up and understanding. But I think, again, we have to overcome the mainstream media and who is not acknowledging this. And so it doesn't hurt to have 10 people shouting into a microphone all the truth about where we are.
Well, it also is interesting when you look at the Republican list of the people that are in it, and I'm sure not all 10 get their signatures, but most of you will. A lot of them, you're not the only person who isn't like a household name. There's a lot of people in here who, to be perfectly frank, nobody has heard of, or at least very little about over the course of the years. There's a couple names in there that are well known, but outside of that, there's a lot of people making their case. So that actually is an interesting opportunity, I would imagine, for you, because there's a lot of very curious people that are seeing many people they don't know and saying, well, I want to learn about them. I want to know what you think. I want to know what you think. I want to know what you think. And they're almost like shopping for a car in a way. It's like, I like some of those features and I like some of those features, but this is the one I'm going to buy.
Yeah. And when I first started campaigning, I was talking to people early on, and they're like, oh, so you're not a politician. I don't know you. And I'm like, yeah, no. And they're like, that's good.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Right? That's good, right? And that was in kind of my negative category. And within a few months, I'm like, we'll move that over to the positive. I guess that's a really good thing. And so I do think that there's a large contingent of Mainers who are just done with career politicians. And we need a fresh perspective, not just a new face. But we need a fresh perspective on the issues.
Speaking of those issues, might be a good place to kind of dive into a little bit here. You mentioned sort of like the personal economics stuff, and I'm going to, I guess, keep going into the well on that poll that just came out, the omnibus poll, because one of the things that was inside of it was, what do you care about? What are the things that matter to you? And that issue, or that collection of issues, was by far, it was far and away the most important thing to most people. And I think that the reason why is because it's just all the things that you listed are much more expensive and harder to do now.
Yeah.
It's funny. You're old enough to remember this, but a long time ago, Maine was kind of a cheap place. Yeah. It was an inexpensive place to buy a house. It was a decent place for energy. It was actually not that expensive to live here. And now it's one of the more expensive places to live in the country. That's quite a transition. And to the point you just made, it's about policy. So tell me about what broke along the way. And we can take it issue by issue, housing, energy, all that stuff. But what do you think broke along the way, and what's required to fix it? Because it's a big job to fix it. We're digging out of a pretty big hole here.
Yeah, it is a big job. And it's funny because you can go issue by issue, But at the same time, every issue is all connected, right? And so we can talk about energy,
Good
but the
place to start.
reality is energy is affecting housing. It's affecting everything else, and the environment is affecting the energy. And so, what broke? Ultimately, 8 years of one-party rule, specifically with the Democrats, and energy-wise, they're focused on their green environmental theory over the people of Maine. The bottom line is that Maine is not going to swing the environment. Number one, I would also make the argument if carbon is the issue, then we're net positive
We're
because
already
of all
carbon
of our
neutral,
trees,
yeah,
right? Like
right.
we're beyond neutral. Like we
Yeah.
are positively affecting by having 90% of our state covered with trees. We are positively affecting it, and so the reality is we don't need to be making these decisions, and we certainly shouldn't be making the decisions that are dramatically negatively affecting your life and mine, and making it so people leave the state. But ultimately, this administration and legislature, and for 8 years, have been going hard towards the green energy. And the reality is that solar and wind are, I'm perfectly fine. If you want solar, you should be able to do that. My family, we considered getting solar at some point. We didn't, but it was a consideration. I think it works for you. But the reality is it doesn't work for the state as a whole, and it's inefficient. It's ineffective at meeting all of our energy needs, and it's costly with that. And so we need to pivot. We're also tearing down hydro dams. Why would we do that? And I would make the argument they are green, right? And so
Oh, no,
if
they
it's
are.
if
They
it's
absolutely
right, like
are.
if it's truly about being green, why is that kind of the stepchild that we're not allowing to play in the game? And
Well, you already answered that
we're
question, though,
tearing them
didn't you?
down.
I mean, it's the sort of agenda-driven,
Yeah.
larger partisan goal, if you will, to try to reshape what energy looks like. I mean, the criticism I've always had about it is that they are prioritizing like the industry and how they want it to look over what people end up paying.
Correct.
The first priority should be the consumer and what they end up
100%.
paying, and it's the last thing on the list now.
Correct. The families of Maine are hurting because of our terrible energy decision policy that is coming out of Augusta. The other thing that this legislature and Janet are great at is kind of deflecting the blame. You hear people all over the state talk about CMP and Versant, and I'm not going to sit here and defend them, right? Like I'm not defending CMP or Versant, but I will say that the problem lies in the policies that CMP and Versant are having to play with and uphold. And so
I'm talking about like PUC and
yeah,
all that
yeah,
stuff,
and again, how much needs to be renewable and all of this, right? Like it's the energy that they have to get, and so the reality is the legislature is perfectly fine with people blaming CMP and Versant, and they do that all the time. Most recently, I'm trying to remember the number of the bill. I want to say 2124. Is currently a bill that's going through, and I believe it just passed committee, that ultimately is taking another 1.8 or 2% from the counties for revenue.
Mhm.
And so the state gets 90%, and the county has gotten 10, and they're taking an additional 1.8% from the counties.
Counties which aren't doing that great.
Right?
Right,
Counties
yeah.
which are basically going to need to raise your taxes or cut their personal budget. Well, if they don't cut the budget and your county taxes go up, right, then, look who's the bad guy. The counties, right? And the legislature's over here just going, we wanted to fund this. And they're not willing to cut what they want to cut, so they're just going to take it from another revenue source. And it's just a terrible way to do things.
Yeah. You were right in identifying that all of the issues are sort of interdependent and they may cost higher for all of the things across the board. But what also was striking me when you were talking is that the same like conceit or problem of philosophy is present in all of their attempts in all of these places to do stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all command and control. It's the housing market doesn't have cheap enough prices and we don't have enough of it. So our solution to it is to attempt to control it more and dictate to a market how it should operate and subsidize it and do all this
And
stuff.
rent control,
Right, exactly.
right? Like, yeah, oh,
And
let's
believe me,
put more rules. Let's put
I
more
want to talk
government.
about housing. And I
Yeah.
think we got plenty of stuff in there, but that's the exact same philosophy they have in energy.
Yeah.
It's like we need to control it, make the industry the way that we want it to, and so on and so forth. It's the same thing in healthcare. It's the same. You name something, and it's education. It's the same everywhere, and it always fails.
Yeah.
Is the funny thing.
Yeah. And as I've been campaigning and talking with people, a very common opinion, very common phrase that I always hear is the best government is, a government that leaves me alone, right? That is how the majority of Mainers think. They're just, I need my government to leave me alone. I'm like, wake up. They're not leaving you alone, right? This is the government you get when you don't get involved, when you're not active, and when you don't make things happen. And so we're not to that place where we need to get back to a small government, a limited government. I would still make the argument you shouldn't leave them alone. You need to hold the government accountable. But look where we're at.
I wonder if the problem for some people in recognizing all this is that when you think of the government interfering in your life, you think like a bureaucrat or a cop or somebody telling you no, or interfering in your life directly. But when they interfere with all the things that you live your life with, housing, food, energy,
Right.
whatever, they are interfering with you, but it doesn't feel as direct. It's like you're living with the consequences of their decisions,
Yeah.
and it's harder to connect the dot.
Well,
to
you
the
have
origin
to,
of it.
Yeah, you have to be active and watch what's going on to be able to see that, hey, it's this policy decision and the implications and results of that are what are affecting me. And that's a lot harder of a dot to connect unless you are active and watching.
Yeah.
And so, again, going back to my job as a candidate is to get out there and connect some of those dots and educate the voters on this policy is affecting your life in this way. And you need somebody in office who will make a different policy, who will remove that barrier as well.
Well, with all these things, and we'll get into some of the other ones too, but with all these things that you're going to be attempting to fix and change, because it's a lot, there is a calculus that's important within that, which is that you are not going to be, say, as Mills would like to be, a dictatorial, authoritarian, me and no one else kind of governor, because it's really not possible unless you have a legislature that just rubber stamps everything you do, which is why she could get away with it, by the way.
Right.
So you're probably going to have a more difficult field to work with.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume, hope that everything goes your way and that you have a
Wouldn't it be amazing
Republican
if it was all
trifecta,
sunshine and
everything.
roses?
Yeah, it was all
Absolutely.
great. But realistically, you might have, I mean, LePage certainly did, divided government and plenty of problems with sometimes his own party, and you don't just get what you want here. How do you navigate the radical change that's necessary? It's not just the edges. It's not just the margins. It's the radical change you need to do when you have so many other people who along the way can sabotage it and can stop you from actually making a substantial difference in the policy environment in your state. You're sort of seeing this nationally right now, are you not? I mean, you have a very active president. You have a very dithering, non-active Congress in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And, they're failing us in many ways when, look at it from our perspective. And so completely agree with you. And I think that I really want to emphasize one of your points. We are not entering a time for tweaks, right? We're entering a time for reform. Like, we need to turn this around and go the other direction. And I do believe that as you have more of the political insider candidates, like oftentimes they're looking and saying, "Oh, I would tweak this. I would change this a little bit."
Yeah.
And listening to their policy, I'm like, no, like, we need reform. We need more than tweaks. And so again, I think that's some of the benefit that political outsiders such as myself bring to the table is we're willing to go further. The reality is, though, as you point out, like, how do you get there? And it's not just me, it's any Republican governor that is next, very well could have a hard time doing that. I think it's realistic that we could flip the House and that we could take the House as a majority. Hopefully we can take the House as a majority to the point where we can get Secretary of State and Attorney General, right? I think getting the Senate will be a lot bigger of a challenge. I think it's doable, but I think it's not nearly as realistic as the House. I will also say on that end, my campaign from the get-go, I've seen the silos all over the Republican Party within the state. And
What do you mean by silos?
by silos, I mean you have, so again, I've been running for multiple terms. And so I've been reaching out to state reps. I've been reaching out to senators. I've been reaching out to people, selectmen, city councilors, stuff like that, and just saying, hey, listen, I'll help. If you're willing to have my palm cards in with yours, I'm willing to go and knock on a bunch of doors. I'm willing to do that with you. And some, we've gone door to door all over the state, helping people in this way. But many of them no, and they're like, you know what, I'm good. And so we need to start working together as a team and be more efficient and communicating together and being willing to associate with each other. Like I'm not,
It's not been a hallmark of the political
it's not
right.
right. And I'm not saying, hey, if I'm, let's say you're running and I throw your palm cards in there, like I'm not saying you need to endorse me. I'm not saying I'm going to endorse you, but the reality is we're close enough on most of the issues that, okay, and this is going to help you get a seat. We just most recently did that in Lewiston with the special election. We were
almost got over the finish line there.
We did.
That was much closer than you would have imagined it would.
I was told we were going to be 25% off. My campaign, again, I'm not taking anything away from Janet. She ran a good campaign. She did so much without us. We came in late in the last couple of weeks and said, hey, we want to help. And so we just tried helping to get her across the finish line. We knocked on hundreds of doors. We sent thousands of texts and calls, and just threw this team together at the last second to do it. But that's what we're going to need, is we're going to need people working together across, tear those silos down and work together. Her race really has nothing to do with my race, other than, quite honestly, if she wins and I become governor, it'd be really nice to have that seat as an R, right?
Yeah.
And we need more of that around the state. And so that's, again, you're talking about working within the party. I'm already doing that. I'm working within the party to build those fences and help each other out and create that unity that doesn't exist along the party. And I want to take that to the Blaine House with me. I'm also, as a selectman, I understand that it's not partisan. But the reality is that there were people around the selectman table that had very different approaches to life and perspectives. And I was successful in those 4 years of working together with them and working beyond our differences. And I think the single biggest thing that I do really well that really helped with that adventure was I listen. I'm willing to sit there and say, this might be a good idea. Tell me about it, and ask questions and dig and truly listen to what they're saying. I may walk away going, that was a pretty terrible idea, right? But I will respectfully listen, and because you're a human, and again, I don't have a monopoly on the good ideas. And so I think that there's a lot of people who they just don't even do that. Oh, you're a Democrat? Not listening.
Certainly in Janet's
approach,
for sure.
And we've seen that on the flip side, right? And so the reality is we need somebody who's willing to listen.
Honestly, that was one of the most disappointing things about her tenure, outside of doing like nothing that I agree with and sort of opposing everything I believe in. She was and is just completely intolerant of any sort of dissent or other opinion besides something that generates from her office. We started talking to her, or at least trying to, early in her administration, even before COVID hit. Her first budget, a lot of the first things that she did on the education front. And it was very quickly apparent that there was no intention of listening, not only to any sort of right of center opinion, but also people within her own party that didn't really agree with this or that. She plays some pretty brass knuckles politics with some of those people. She's a very intolerant politically person, which is interesting.
Yeah, and you can see it even as simple of a gesture as, Shenna Bellows turning off comments on all of her political posts, or all of her posts, really. Really, I just don't care what you think.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to hear your perspective. But then you also see the big picture. of one that comes to mind really obviously was LD 1619 a couple years ago.
Oh yeah, that was
Right. Like
that was
you
probably the
literally
best
had,
example of brass knuckles
yeah, you
politics.
literally had 10 times the number of people show up to say, don't do this. This is bad for Maine. 10 times the number of regular citizens showing up. They literally stayed the night. I went there. I ended up submitting my talking points because I took the day off.
Couldn't wait that long.
I took the day off, and I'm like, I looked at it, I'm like, hindsight, I took the wrong day off because my name wasn't called until 6:30 the next morning. And they
Wow.
literally went all night long, and that's even after, again, kind of side note, but they allowed all the people for it to go first and get their full 3 minutes, and then you had, again, 10 times the number of people who were against it, and then they started cutting 2 minutes down to 1 minute by the time 6:30 came. And so, really, I don't care what you think. They passed it anyway and said, "Yep, thank you so much."
Well, they didn't
Nope.
just pass it. I mean, they
No.
played that old game where
Oh,
they were like
they crammed it
hauling
through.
in people, from far away and having somebody more or less apprehended to come vote.
Yeah.
They did. There was like at least 2 or 3 Democrats that really didn't want to vote for that. They got completely flipped on it by their leadership
And one
and
ended up
Mills.
getting primaried.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was really actually very disappointing to watch how because you think of that stuff in Washington.
Yeah.
The higher up the food chain you get, the worse this gets. But even here in Maine,
No.
you have a little bit of naivete hoping that doesn't happen here, but it totally does.
No, the swamp has come to Augusta.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it has. You got to clean it up. So I know we talked about energy, and I want to make sure that we continue to talk about some of these issues. You had pushed a couple of my buttons by talking about rent control and inclusionary zoning and all the things that are wrong in specifically Portland, but it's not just Portland. It's a lot of Maine. It's some of the larger cities that are trying to deal with the housing crunch, obviously. But this is one of these topics that I talk with candidates about on this interview at length because I think that we all recognize what's wrong. Like the wrong policies, the bad things. But many of them, if not most of them, are municipal. So a governor who comes into office can point at them and say, that's wrong and that's bad. But the Portland City Council can say, I don't care, and just ignore you. How do you actually make a difference in a state on the housing front with the problems that it has in an environment that actually makes the governor pretty weak in the system? I mean, there's definitely things you can do on the state level, but like, let's call a spade a spade. Portland is the biggest problem.
Yeah.
And they have the worst policies. And finding some way of affecting that is essential if you're going to fix it.
So there's several things playing into this, right? As you know, Maine is home rule. And again, with my years on the select board, I really love the home rule aspect of it. Again, I don't think, just like I don't want the federal government being all powerful, I don't want the state government being all powerful. And the reality is, the Portlands and the South Parises do have the ability to make some of these terrible decisions and have the repercussions from those terrible decisions. Now, I do think that where those terrible decisions start to impact you and I in our tax dollars, we can certainly have that conversation with them and be willing to pull some of the purse strings and talk through, hey, listen, you're making this decision. It's going to cost you X thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. People are going to be leaving, and we can take a look at that. So
they don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been said to them.
Yeah.
And the problem I identify with them is that it's almost a willful disregard of reality. Like they occupy a wishful thinking reality. Like they want rent control to make sense.
Right.
They want inclusionary zoning to be smart. They want all the other things they do to be something that makes it better. And half of that council is made up of Democratic Socialists of America who live in this fantasy land. So you can say it all you want to them, but they don't care.
Yeah.
So but you did mention incentives kind of a little bit.
Yeah. And so again, I think, whether you like it or not, we live in a world where the cities, municipalities, Portland, we'll just talk Portland in this case, right, is dependent on money from the federal government or from the state government. And so, again, I'm not a big fan of that, but the reality is that money always has strings attached. And so we can pull some of those strings. We can say, listen, you guys are number one on receiving benefits from the state, right, for Maine Care. And so we can say, if you're making these decisions, then we're going to hold some of that back, and we can talk through what those decisions look like. It needs to be their decisions. I don't believe it's the state government's place to override and say, this is what you will do.
So then you wouldn't support something like a statewide ban on rent control or something like that?
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah. That's always the trick for people on the right side of the aisle.
Correct.
Is whether you want to have a mandate that stops the
again,
bad thing.
I'm a limited government person, and I don't think it's exactly the same thing Janet's doing, only on the other side. And so they will have the repercussions, and people will leave Portland and go to surrounding towns that don't have these oppressive policies. And at some point, they're going to have to acknowledge that and see what that looks like. I'm willing to pull some of the purse strings and try to persuade them and have those conversations. And I think having those hit some of the headlines and talk through that, again, I think your people in Portland will start to acknowledge and see what's going on and see the negative impact, as long as it's getting out there.
Mm-hmm.
And having a governor who's willing to do that, unlike our current ones, will help with that and help speed things up.
I will say the one argument that does get to me a little bit on the sort of statewide ban stuff, because I think I'm where you are on it, but I'm at least flirtatious with the idea. I think the only argument that I get that makes a little bit of sense is that because of the decisions that they make, they're warping and twisting the market for everyone else. I mean, at the end of the day, you've seen the report, and we talk about it all the time, but there's that 80,000 home need that we have that's already a gap by 2030. And unless the largest places where the most demand are build something and make it available, then the problem persists and it gets worse. And it gets worse for people in Yarmouth, Freeport, Brunswick, Topsom, just as much as it gets for Portland, because Portland isn't relieving any of that pressure. And South Portland ends up mimicking a lot of their policies. And so does, Gorham and Scarborough and everything else. So I think I actually am where you are on it, but like that is a good argument in my book.
Yeah, I think that's the closest argument for it. But I would also make the argument that there are so many policies, there are so many laws in Augusta that influence the entire state in a more direct way. The reality is those laws, many of them are placed there. They come to Augusta from Portland, and then they're impacting the entire state. And so we have our housing, if you really simplify it, and obviously there's a ton that goes into it, but it's a supply and demand issue. And so we have to find ways to increase supply and impact the demand. And so there's a ton of that we can do as long as we're able to successfully repeal bad legislation in Augusta. Again, really we're tying a lot of the housing standards to the federal level. We're requiring things at a state level that we don't need to be requiring. We can look at the DEP. We can look at the process, right, with that a builder goes through. I've met with
it's a nightmare.
a bunch of builders all over the state, right, over the last couple of years, and ultimately, they're looking at that process and talking about the amount of money, the increase in the cost of a house in Maine simply because of unnecessary regulation. And I'm not saying completely, wild, wild west it, right? But the reality is there's a ton of regulation that is influencing or creating roadblocks for our builders in the state of Maine that we can remove, and it will create a boom in supply, and it will help the cost of housing go down. And those are levers that we can pull all over the state, and it will absolutely help. The other piece that a lot of people don't like to talk about is we have illegal immigrants here, right? We have a fairly large, I believe, illegal immigrant population, and that
So you're talking about higher demand.
That's increasing demand, right? So we need to address that, which we need to work well with ICE to be able to address that. And when they are no longer here, then that demand will go down. We've literally had, our government has kicked people out of their house to put in housing for these people. And so, again, we need
At very
to,
great expense.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
a huge expense, right? So again, that impacts everything, and so it's an issue and it needs to be addressed. But there's all that to say, like,
Is there a lever? I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you,
no.
but is there a lever inside some of the state controlled programs for trying to force that to happen? And what I mean specifically is Portland, and I'm sorry to pick on Portland, but Portland spends an enormous amount of its general assistance budget on basically housing for a lot of,
Yeah.
frankly, non-Mainers. I know we say new Mainers a lot, but there is, I mean, the hotel bills, there's
Yeah.
obviously vouchers for apartments and all this other stuff. It is an insane amount of money. As governor, you could, if you wanted to,
Yeah.
attempt to change the general assistance rules and try to restrict that and lean that down, which would have, I think, an effect on the ability for someone to be able to kind of stay here if they were here.
Somebody
not
to,
only
to make
legally,
us
but
attractive,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the reality is, why are people coming? They're coming because it's attractive. If you could go to some place that you've never been and they're going to give you free housing and free food and free healthcare, and you don't have that where you're at, like, okay,
you'll do it.
right? Like, yeah, right. And so we have made it attractive. We've made it attractive for them to come to Maine, and specifically some of these urban areas, and we can make it not attractive. And so, yes, 100%. The government should not be giving freebies to non-citizens. We have, especially where we're at right now, where our citizens and our veterans are hurting so much, and our budget has gone up by $4.4 billion or more by that time, right? Like, we can't afford it. Even if we wanted to, we can't afford it. But I'm going to make the argument that no, we shouldn't be giving freebies to non-citizens. And so that would make it less attractive if they're not getting that money. And I think that would encourage them to go someplace where the freebies are, right? Minnesota or wherever. And so I believe that is one of the overall overarching pieces that I have as far as making policies is the way you are and the decisions we make determines the direction the state goes. And what I mean by that is we are making decisions that make us really attractive to these people who want free stuff, and they come, right? If we start making decisions that make us really attractive to people with money and business people, entrepreneurs, things like that, with lower energy prices, lower housing, better education, all of that, those people will come,
Yeah.
right? And so you get what you go for, and we're going for the wrong things, and we have been for the last 8 years.
And it's particularly problematic when you also note that the state is aging, and we're already the oldest one in the country
Yeah.
by a lot, and the tax base
Yeah.
for supporting those types of services is evaporating before your very eyes.
I was just going to say, let's talk about that tax base, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality is, the people with money, who's, by the way, those are the people who are paying taxes, right? The people with money, why do they have money? Because they're really good with their money. And what does somebody who's really good with their money do when their government just continually takes more and more and more? They leave. They take their money and they go. Right, 6 months in a day to Florida, or 6 months in a day to Texas or Tennessee or someplace,
or 12 months,
or 12 months,
Yeah.
right? And so that we are seeing that, and we will see that in an increasing amount as things get worse and worse if we don't change things in 2026. So the reality is, it is a critical year for the state of Maine.
Another thing I want to spend a chunk of time on, is education, which you cited up top as one of the things that drove you into the race.
Yeah.
We all know about a lot of the more controversial things that we've debated, everything from the trans athletes in sports issue to the things that you had cited up front, in your school boards issue. The other thing, though, that's so basic to every voter is just like how their kids are learning in school. I mean, the results on the nation's
fundamentals.
report card are horrible. My daughter, or my older daughter, who's now 9 and in 4th grade, just got yanked out of her class to go take the NAEP test. So she's going to be one of the ones that's counted
Yep.
in the upcoming results. And I'm sure she'll do great.
I hope she skews it.
I'm sure she does great, but the whole state as a whole has been not only performing poorly, but increasingly poorly.
Yeah.
It's been getting worse and worse and worse. And it's through the tenure of Janet Mills. I hate to say it. And she touts that 55% funding thing.
Yeah.
Every time she opens her mouth about education, she did at her State of the State address, a little section on education, and it's all she said about it. She didn't highlight the results. She didn't say things are getting better because they're not. She just congratulated herself on dumping a bunch of money in the system.
Yeah.
And wonderful. Thank you for the money. But it's obviously not paying
It's a
off
broken
in
system.
results. So how do you fix it?
Yeah. So absolutely. I'm looking at, again, we need to get back to the fundamentals.
This, by the way, could be a 3-hour portion
It
of our
very well
podcast,
could, right? Like,
Yeah.
And it gets me all worked up. It really is one of my core principles and platform issues because again, I have a 17, 19, and 21-year-old. And so at some stage here, I'm not going to push them, but we'll have grandkids that are going to be on the scene. And it's those grandkids that are going to be affected by what I do in office.
Are they going to stay in Maine, by the way? Are they?
I really hope so. We're working on it. They're all still here, but we're working on that. And in complete transparency, we homeschooled all 3 of our kids. And again, if you do the math, this was quite a while ago. Josh is 21. That wasn't a political decision at the time. My wife, was a teacher, and we said we're gonna, she wants to be a stay-at-home mom, and we were fortunate enough to be able to make that work. And it was hands down the single best parenting decision that we've ever made. Now, when I look back on it, but the reality is
you did avoid quite a few bear traps in there, didn't you?
We did. It was
Wow.
amazing. And again, when you listen to them and you watch them live life now, highly successfully, it just, as a parent, you're like, this is it, right? Like this is why we do this. And parenting will be hands down the most important role that I play in this life. And so when I look at it, though, not everybody can do that. Not everybody can afford to or have the ability, whatever that is. And so we need to make our public schools successful at teaching. And I know you've heard all the stats, you're referring to it, but 74% of our 4th graders in 2024 were not proficient in reading. Math isn't much better. 67% of our 4th graders were not proficient at doing math. How are we setting them up for success, right? And so kind of getting along to the solution aspect of it, number one, I come from the business world, and in the business world, we have competition. Our public schools don't have competition. We have to increase competition. When you go to your schools and you say, "Oh, you need to do this," like, yeah, whatever. They have that same mentality that we were talking about with the legislature and with Janet of, you know what, we do what we want. It really is. It's a monopoly of sorts, and so we need to.
Oh no, it's a monopoly in actual.
We need to create that competition in this education system. If our purpose in education is to have our young people be successful when they get out of school, then it shouldn't matter whether they do that through public school, private school, charter school, homeschool, micro school. It doesn't matter. And so we need to open that up and allow the parents to have that choice. Now, I'm not your traditional school choice guy because of the money that's attached to government funds. That terrifies me. And I look and I don't know that we would have accepted that if that option was there while we're homeschooling. But I think you don't
like you're saying,
like a voucher,
yeah.
right? Like I don't want to go a voucher style. I think you can go with a tax credit style where the government's not giving you this money. You're just not giving the government that much money. And so we cut down how much you need to pay the government in taxes because you've put your money towards your child's education.
It is sort of an interesting time in the school choice universe because it used to be virtually impossible to see a state even experimenting with true choice. It was always one of these like sort of in vogue ideas, but it was never politically potent enough to win at the ballot box or have somebody champion a bill through a legislature. And yet in the last like 2 or 3 years, you've seen, I think we're up to like a dozen states now that have some version of full school choice, whether it's voucher or whether it's, I know there's the open enrollment idea, which I like quite a bit that Florida does. And believe it or not, Minnesota does. There's different versions of it. But the very fact that they're even allowing anything is different.
Correct. And again, ultimately, I'm looking at it from a competition standpoint. And as soon as you have those dollars flowing to other schools and other options, and parents leaving at a higher rate, taking their kids at a higher rate, it will open it up, and the superintendents, the administration will say, we need to do something. We need to acknowledge these people. There's no longer a monopoly here. They don't have to have their kids here. They have valid options, and
That's the word.
It will change.
I would, if I was encouraging any Republican who's talking about this, any conservative who's talking about it, options is the one, because competition, I mean, I'm a market guy, so I believe in that. Like, competition is the thing that solves it, but the reason it solves it is because of the options.
Correct.
When something isn't working, you can leave, and you have an option to go to something that you think would fit you better.
Yeah.
And when all the people have the option to do that, it naturally sorts us into the best performing places, because we're intolerant of the things that don't work, and we try for the better things. It works in supermarkets, it works in car dealerships, it works in everything. You name it, you name a industry, and that's what it works in.
And our government doesn't do it.
And this one, we don't do it.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's just not logical, right?
Yeah.
Like, we need common sense. We need to get there and give those options to parents. So the other big complaint I have as far as our education system is, again, you're going to see the limited government part of me here, but Augusta keeps sticking their nose in it, right? They keep micromanaging from Augusta. And theoretically,
that's that command and control thing.
Yeah, it is.
Right? Yeah.
And theoretically, our districts are supposed to be able to make their own decisions, right? Oh, anytime you go to somebody in Augusta and talk about your school district, they go talk to your school district, right? Like, and they point the finger. What is the first thing? And I don't know if you've done this, but I've been quite active and vocal, if you can imagine, at my local school district and talking about the costs, because they continue to skyrocket.
Yeah, your property taxes
costs are going up, right? Your property taxes are going up. The quality of education is going down. The amount of administration is going up, and the number of students is going down. And so I'm going, well, this is crazy.
Explain this to me.
Yeah. And so I'm looking at the budget and saying, listen, like, the amount of your administration costs continues to skyrocket. Every single time I get a finger point to Augusta, they're requiring us to do this. They're requiring us to do this. They're requiring us to do this. We need people to do all these reports. We need people to do all this. So we need administrators. The reality is Augusta is effectively creating a feeling or a need for the schools to hire more non-teachers, costing us money and not focused on education. And so we need to get Augusta out of there. We need to be able to say, hey, here is the bar for what it means to graduate in Maine. Right? This is where we expect our students to graduate. End of story. However they get there.
Good luck.
However they get there, and we need to be able to do that. We need to pull Augusta out of there so our school districts can be held accountable for what they're doing, and they can have the responsibility as well as the power to be able to do what they're doing and say, you know what, all of this isn't necessary. We're going to do this.
Funny thing is that it hits the teachers too. I mean,
it does.
The administrative stuff is an increased demand on every school system, but the teachers themselves have all these mandates and requirements, some of which are federal, some of which are state, that take them out of teaching. My wife is a teacher, and so she used to gripe about this all the time, where she was spending half of her time filling out a form, doing record keeping, like all the things that you need to do to make the bureaucrats in whatever capital happy, that you're doing your job, and that's just time you're not lesson planning. You're not, you're not working extra with a kid. You're
right?
not,
like that's why they got into teaching. And let me just be really clear: as harsh and hard on the public education system as I am, it's not focused on the teachers. The reality is, I've had hundreds of conversations with teachers around the state, and it's impacting them in a very negative way. And I believe
in a totally nonpartisan way too.
Yeah. I believe their world would be better.
Left, right, everybody.
With the system that I dream of and work on creating.
Yeah.
So,
well, the other thing too, and this is to your point that you're making that I think backs it up a lot, is there's also a soft power that comes out of Augusta. They have a lot of mandates and requirements for these school districts to comply with. But when you looked, I go back to COVID for a minute. When you looked at so many of the things that they did for reopening policies, so many of the things that they did for masking policies, everything that they did around COVID, and people don't recognize this, but most of them were optional. There was not actually a lot of hard mandates for these, but because of them being the Department of Education and the natural influence that has, and the guidance that comes from them and the sort of like softly worded suggestions which sound like mandates.
It's almost like veiled threats.
It is.
Right? Like it really is.
But even if it isn't, a lot of them just go along with it because it's what advice I'm getting.
Yeah.
And that soft power is incredible in this system, and it's responsible for a lot of the worst things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you bring up a great point with the Maine Department of Education, right? They are, it's so funny as you have conversations in the political world, right? Like they talk about how they don't really mandate things. They don't really, but then you go and you have a conversation in the school world and they're talking about how Maine Department of Education is telling them they need to do this, they need to do that. And so it's exactly what you're talking about. They're not officially mandating this. However, that power influence is real and it's there and it's impacting our kids in horrible ways. And so we need to absolutely cut that power in the Department of Education, and it does not need to be nearly as big. It does not need to cost the state nearly as much. And that would certainly be part of where I would cut the budget, with that first budget.
It's a brave man to do that.
And again,
it's
let me be
necessary,
clear.
but it's hard.
Let me be clear. I am not talking about cutting the funding to the schools. Okay. I'm talking about cutting that entity, the Maine Department of Education in Augusta, that is wagging.
But you know what they'll say about you.
It's a tail that's wagging the dog.
You know what they'll say about you, though.
Oh,
when
yeah.
you do that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, it makes it hard. I mean, I can't possibly be more sympathetic to what you're saying. I can't. And I sincerely hope it works. It's just, I've seen the movie before where you have somebody who comes into office who understands what's wrong and tries to do that kind of thing. But the public rhetorical sort of arguments that are presented to everyday people out there are cheap. They're lies oftentimes. And they're just completely misleading as to what you're attempting to do. Right. And it gets people, especially with union support, it gets people whipped up thinking you're going to harm kids and students and teachers when you're going after the administration, the bloat, and the problems that are really ultimately responsible for it. Right. And then political support craters, and it makes it impossible for you to pass a bill. Yeah. It's the only reason I bring it up is it's you need some level of public cooperation if you're going to do something that dreaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get it? I mean, is it just a public, like a bully pulpit thing? Like it's a...
Yeah. I mean, as governor, you're going to be able to, whether they're your friends or not, you're going to be able to talk to the media. You're going to be able to talk to the main wire, right? Yep. But you're going to be able to have those conversations. But again, I also think that it's relationship building as well. And it's listening to people. It's having those conversations in Augusta that talks through that. But ultimately, I think... and you're seeing it with the different campaigns that are going on. It's education. It's educating the public on what is going on behind the scenes and what we're doing, and just being crystal clear, which my years of leadership, I have learned that crystal clear means like you are saying the same thing 100 different times in 100 different ways. And then you're still going to have some people who don't get it, but it's just going to be over communicating. Hey, here's the plan. Let me lay it out. Let me talk about why we're doing this part of it, why we're doing that part of it, and just communicating and over communicating to really the open public, as well as all of the pieces, and show that vision, show where we're going. It's scary, right? It is different than we're doing, but the reality is our schools, if you look at financially, our schools have become much more about employment centers than education centers. And if you can accomplish, I would even say, better results with less money, we need to go that route.
Yeah, and I think that the reason why sometimes it fails is because of the more money.
Yeah.
It gets in the way.
Yeah.
It's not going
We're
to
gonna throw
a
more
new
money
book.
at it.
It's going to stuff that actually interferes with that book being read.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a good point. As we start to get to the end of our time together here a little bit, we haven't talked about it specifically as an issue, but I've heard it in almost everything you've said so far, limiting the government and trying to look for these places and cutting the budget and the Department of Education and whatnot. That budget is a nightmare. It's grown. I think you had mentioned 4-point-something billion.
That's a conservative number.
Well, that's not with her supplemental that's coming in now, which is going to up it even more. And then she's rating the rainy day fund. So it's actually it's 5 now at this point. Let's just say it. Yeah. But anyway, in order to actually truly affect that, which it definitely sounds like you want to do, you have to go where the money is. And you just named one of the places where it is. The other place where it is the Department of Health and Human Services. Yeah. And God, that could be a 3-hour podcast, right? Yeah. There's so many things inside of it that require reform and that are broken and that need to be fixed. But there's some really big things that cost a lot of money, right? I mean, Medicaid expansion being one of them. I don't know your feelings on it. Happy to throw it over to you and get what you think about that specific issue and healthcare and the market and DHHS and all that stuff, for sure. But also it's things like Child Protective Services, which is failing miserably.
Yes.
And killing kids
worst
in our
nation.
Horrible.
Worst in the nation.
Horrible. And no one in the government seems to care about it.
Yeah.
You've heard zero from the Mills administration, Mills herself, about this issue. And I realize she doesn't want to talk about it.
Right.
But leadership would be, this is a problem. We're going to fix it. Correct. We're going to confront it. Not, I'm ignoring the problem. Right. So that's a very vague and general question for you, I recognize. But overall, that is a big part of the puzzle. The Department of Health and Human Services and everything wrong with it. So what do you do about it?
It is. And as when I talk other issues, kind of the non-personal economics issues, right? That's one of the top ones that comes up. It's just always DHHS, different aspects of it. Certainly that we've, lost more kids than any other state, is part of that. But just ultimately across the board, DHHS is failing. And so to me, number one, I look at, we'll get into the budget part of that, but that's a leadership failure. When the things that I sat down with Bill Diamond in a class and had the honor of listening to him talk about it for a few hours when he was still with us. And then I've had multiple different conversations with frontline people that are interacting and part of DHHS. And again, these people didn't even know each other. But all the same conclusions every single time is it is a toxic culture in there. It's a culture of protectionism, like they're going to protect their own at all costs.
Very true.
And they're absolutely not focused on the actual purpose of the department. They're not focused on the children in that case, right? And so we need new leadership, and you need to acknowledge, I believe the majority of the front lines people are hard workers and will be successful.
Oh, they are the last
right?
problem.
They're not the problem, right? And so we need new leadership, and we need to go in there with a change of culture is the only acceptable answer. And so,
wasn't it telling that when the head of that agency left, which everybody, I remember talking to Bill about this when that happened. Everybody was like, "This is it. This is the chance. You can start over, hire from the outside." Something can happen, and then to promote the prior lieutenant, the person who was the number 2 in that office, and be same boss knew was the same, and again, same as the old boss, right?
Yeah, Janet had that chance, and I was like, okay, here we go. No, like, and as soon as I was like, no, like that's not what we need. So anyway, we need new leadership. We need to acknowledge that there's failure here, and it's a culture of failure, and then. When you have that culture of failure, your costs are going to go up. That's what happens in business, right? And so it's going to happen here as well. So just changing that culture and putting in new leadership will help. Not substantially, but it will help the budget woes piece of that. But the reality is, we've expanded Maine Care considerably who qualifies for that, to the point where she was not this last state of the state, but the one before, she was bragging that we have 400,000 people on Maine Care. And I'm like, that's not a bragging point, right?
That's
like,
a failure.
You understand that's a failure of your leadership, right? And
doesn't that get to the core of all this? Is that she views that as a win?
Correct.
So sliding somebody
if
into
your goal
a state,
is to make people dependent on your government, then it is a win, right? But when you look at it and say, they have 400,000 people, we have 400,000 people. Comparatively, New Hampshire, with a very similar population, very similar in so many ways, they have 180, right? Like, we are more than double what New Hampshire has. We are doing things wrong. We are creating dependency on the government, and we shouldn't be. And so we need to, with Maine Care, we should not be paying for able-bodied adults, childless adults.
So are you suggesting a full repeal of it, or are you talking about maybe trying to reform it so it looks like the New Hampshire model?
Yeah,
they do have expansion.
I was going to say, I would like to go a lot closer to what New Hampshire has. It seems from an outside perspective and everything I've researched, it seems to be working. I would be
think my
happy.
take on
I would be happy to be down to 200,000, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so again, I think we need to take a look at New Hampshire and make it work for our state. But again, we shouldn't be giving free benefits to non-citizens, and we're doing that as well. And so I think some of those changes will dramatically lower the cost of our Maine care. And so we need to address the budget. Maine care, you can't do that without affecting Maine care. I want to go in and cut the budget $2 billion. I know $2 billion sounds like a lot. I guess a couple. My thought was, again, if it's gone up by 5, 2 is pretty lean or pretty lax. Really, you could go more.
If you cut it to what it was in LePage's tenure, and just adjusted for inflation, you could immediately cut it by 2 right out of the gate, because it would be,
and that's what we need to do.
The non-inflationary spending.
Yeah, and that's what we need to do. Is the reality is year one budget, I want to go to a $2 billion, cut it by $2 billion. And then I want to take that $2 billion and I want to immediately impact property taxes. I want to expand homestead exemption from $25,000 to $300,000. I hate property tax. We again, your towns, your schools right now in the current way that were designed are dependent on that. I acknowledge that as a former selectman, right? But I think long term, so this is a temporary, let's increase the homestead exemption on primary residence for Maine people. And that will help so many families who are struggling with fixed income. And again, do you really own your home if the government can take it because you can't pay the taxes?
My property taxes
right?
are per month what a mortgage was for my parents.
Yeah.
That is insane.
Yeah, it is. And so we need to fix that. This is a Band-Aid. I acknowledge that. This is not a long-term fix. But I believe that, if given the task as a legislature, we can figure out the taxation system. How can your town and your school get funding without property taxes? And it's a big problem, but I think it's one that if we put all of our minds together, we can figure out.
Yeah.
And we can eventually mostly eliminate property taxes or make it a much more reasonable piece of
Nobody
our life.
believes that's possible.
I believe it's possible.
Well, I
right?
agree with you, because Florida's talking about it.
I was just going to say, and you have other states
Yeah.
who are working on it. Why can't we push the envelope on things like that, right? And creating liberty and freedom for people, and allowing, that's going to impact your housing prices as well, right? So I think that we need to consider that. But the homestead exemption jump from 25 to 300, that can be done with a $2 billion budget cut, and then we can move on to also impacting income tax. Then let's just talk about the fraud, right? We know there's fraud in the system, and mismanagement and everything like that.
Particularly in that department.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Huge in that department, right? And so I am 100% convinced that is there, and we just need a willingness to be able to look into that and figure it out and address the issues, hold people accountable, and change our system so it's not as easy to do that. And so we don't know the dollar amount of that fraud, but I guarantee you it's going to really help taxpayers save money when it's addressed and no longer in the budget.
Yeah, and there's one aspect where you're getting rid of the fraud and like cutting off all that kind of stuff, but then systemically,
correct,
to try to set things up so that fraud can't come back, or otherwise be done again.
Correct.
I think that's one of the biggest things that we've seen in the Mills administration is there's just nobody minding the store.
Yeah,
there's no internal systems, there's no legal systems that make the cost of fraud to the people that are doing it high enough that they wouldn't do.
Yeah. And talking about systems, right? The other piece that we've seen, and it doesn't get nearly as much press, is as a government, we are giving really way too much money to nonprofits. Okay. That is not our job. Okay. I go to church. Okay. By the way, that church does not receive state funding. But the people that go to that church fund it. They say, hey, there's a need here. I see the value in what you're bringing to the community, and I want to be part of that. Why is that any different than the vast majority of nonprofits in this state? If you are meeting a need, and many, many, many of them are, then the people who see the benefit that you're bringing to the community will help fund that and make that possible for you to continue to exist. You don't need state funding for that. Yes, again, I'm not shutting off nonprofits altogether. For example, some of our hospitals are nonprofits. Like money will be going from the government to those hospitals, right? Newspapers, some of those are nonprofits. The reality is we may need to advertise jobs, and we would be paying for that advertisement as we should be. Now, what we wouldn't be doing is saying, hey, here's $20,000 to write a positive story about our schools. We would
I wonder why you selected that.
Yeah. Hypothetically, right?
Hypothetically.
The reality is, let's make our schools good, and you will naturally, for free, write a positive story about our schools. And so, again, we are giving money, way too much money, to nonprofits around the state, and that's just not the government's job.
Robert Wessels, Republican candidate for governor of Maine, will be featured actually in our upcoming debate, which is happening on March 24th in Bangor. Very much looking forward to seeing you there. And I guess my final question for you as we wrap things up here, because we could keep going in lots of different
all
directions.
Day, yes.
Certainly, you're free to comment on anything we haven't touched on yet. But my closing question would really just be about the campaign, the other candidates, yourself. You're trying to win. You want to be the nominee, et cetera. So how people would get involved, how you see this race, just overall give me your kind of, I don't know if it's a closing pitch necessarily, but your thoughts on where we stand today.
Yeah. So a recent poll came out and had me in the middle of the pack. Again, 10 candidates, and I was
the UNH poll.
I was number 5. Yeah, the UNH poll. And again, just above me on the list was Jonathan Bush, who has at this point spent $700,000 on his campaign. I was 1% behind him, and I've spent $24,000. And so a lot of people look at me and say, hey, financially, you haven't raised a lot of money. I say, look what I've done with the amount that I've raised. And so my team is absolutely amazing. It's all 100% volunteer, and we are working nonstop to fight for this. And because the reality is, it's because we believe in what we're doing. It's for my kids, my grandkids. It's for turning the state around because somebody needs to do it. It's not for a title, never has been with me. I don't have a fancy title. The reality is I know business, I know finances. I've been teaching finances for the last 18 years. I know small government, and I know that the direction we're going is the wrong direction. So we are absolutely, a true grassroots movement. We've been going for 2.5 years, and we would love for anybody who has enjoyed this episode to be able to come to our website, go to voterobertwessels.com, join us. We are looking for people all over the state, people to put up signs, people to write letters to the editor, and just help out in any way possible with this grassroots movement that really is, again, it's been non-traditional from the beginning. Nobody has really been doing a 2.5 year campaign, and it's been highly successful so far, and we're just going to continue to grow and continue to do it for the next 100 days.
Yeah, a lot of people say it's never been done before, as though that's a negative thing. But the thing that always sort of strikes me is it's never been done before until it has been.
Correct.
And it happens all the time.
Yeah.
So it's obviously what you're hoping for. So Robert Wessels, we appreciate you spending some time
Thank
with
you.
us here and having a conversation about the way things are going. Since the primary is not necessarily right around the corner, but is in the near future. If you end up coming out on top, I'm sure we'll have many more conversations and have many more podcast interviews and whatnot. And you're all over the place anyway. So
Absolutely.
Pleasure as always. And that's it for us. I believe actually that means that we have done all of the Republican candidates. I think I haven't missed anybody. So we'll get, or all the ones that are going to be on the ballot. So we also have done Rick Bennett. We're going to try to get some of the Democrats in the House too. So it's a big conversation with as many of you as we can get.
There are a lot of us. Yeah. And Jason Cherry from the Democrat side just dropped out yesterday.
Oh, I didn't see that.
So yeah.
Okay, well, then one less person to interview, I suppose.
One less person to interview.
Well, we appreciate it, and we'll be back again on, I guess, Friday for our Pine Tree Pulse. We'll see you then.